lucked out that you were here today. Good morning, Seal Beach.
Good morning.
Oh, that means you're kind of awake, right? So one day, Moses, Jesus, and this old man were playing golf. So Moses steps up to the tee, and he hits the ball, and it goes sailing, and it lands in this water element, and he walks up, and he parts the lake that he landed in, and he hits it and puts it right on the green. Jesus steps up to the tee, and he hits the ball, and it goes sailing into the water. So he walks out on the water, and he hits the ball right off the water, right onto the green. The old man steps up to the tee, and he hits the ball, and it goes sailing over the fairway, and it heads for the water trap. But just before it lands in the water, a fish jumps up and grabs the ball. And then an eagle flies down and grabs the fish. And it flies over the green, and it drops the fish right on the green, and the fish drops the ball, and it rolls into the hole. And Jesus turns to the old man and says, "Dad, if you don't stop fooling around, we're not bringing you next time." This has nothing to do with my talk. Sorta. This morning I got up. Yes, that's how I got here. And I wake up in the morning, pretty much every morning, and I meditate. Sundays are a little bit different because I have to be on all day. And when I say on, I mean wherever I go, my intention is to leave it all there. But I can't do that until I meditate, and I study, and I pause, and I shower, and I shave my legs. And I pick out my clothes, actually very carefully, because I like to feel good in what I'm wearing. I like to feel comfortable, and I'm a bit, I would say, what would you say? You call it a fashionista, okay, stylish. I like to look and feel good, so I'm very intentional with what I pick out. And then I do a bit of connection before I even come here. I pray, usually on my way in the car, I pray. And I really get settled into whatever it is I'm going to do. But there's something else that happens along the way. Now I'm going to start with something that has to do, I'm going to show you a video. I think you've seen the video before. For those of you that haven't, enjoy.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Remember this ad? You can go ahead and clap if you like it. I hate to pause an energetic moment, you know. Here's what's wrong with the ad, okay? And I'm not talking Steve Jobs, okay? Here's what's wrong with the ad. There's a woman by the name of Ella Baker, and she says, "Give people light and they will find a way." Now, innovators are often depicted in a story as having accomplished much and accomplishing it alone. That's what's wrong with the ad. Those that walked alongside them are often ignored or even minimized in the stories of their success. You saw some amazing people in that video. Martin Luther King, great man, but he was not the civil rights movement. He represents the civil rights movement. Bayard Rustin, he provided King with a deep understanding of nonviolent ideas and tactics at a time when King had only an academic familiarity with what Gandhi was doing, which was the nonviolent movement. He introduced him to it. Rustin later recalled, "The glorious thing is that he came to a profoundly deep understanding of nonviolence through the struggle itself, through reading and discussions which he had in the process of carrying on the protest." King recognized Bayard Rustin's contributions. Bayard Rustin was a gay man in the 50s and 60s, so he was in no way going to be recognized for what he contributed to the movement. Ella Baker was also influential, just as influential as Martin Luther King. Ella Baker mobilized with grassroots, while Dr. King mobilized with grass tops. Women were not allowed to speak a lot of times during the civil rights movement. It doesn't make it wrong. It just reminds us that sometimes history is written in a way that it minimizes all the lights that are showing up to hold up something like that. Einstein, there was Michel Angelo Besso. He was his sounding board for many years. Besso helped to get Einstein a job at the Swiss patent office where he worked. He's credited with introducing Einstein to the works of Ernst Mach, an Austrian physicist and philosopher who's noted for his contributions to physics and the study of shock waves. Gandhi was supported primarily by his spouse, who was not written about at all in the movement. He was also supported financially by a couple people who never stopped supporting that movement and were there in each and every event that Gandhi was at as he was speaking about India leaving the rule of the British government. Edison is thought to be one of the most significant individuals in our history with respect to innovation. But what's interesting about Edison that you don't hear about is you often think that he, as an individual, did it. Everything about his work was directly connected to other contributors, and his success was dependent on their success in the lab. He was known for the midnight lunch, an endearing term coined by colleagues who would work on projects late into the night. They would come together, you're going to love this word, and collaborate. He was surrounded by a close-knit of trusted colleagues, and it was a communal atmosphere. The reason that we often hold the individual up, and Ella Baker said something that I thought was profound, and she said that it's actually really dangerous. There's a danger in our culture that because a person is called upon to give public statements, is acclaimed by the establishment, and such a person gets to the point and we believe that that person is the movement. We do that in community. We do that with the minister. I am not the movement. No minister has been the movement at any community. The community is the movement. The community inspires the minister. The community inspires itself. The community has the drive, not the person that talks up here. This is a job that we have, and a job that we do take very seriously our call, but we do not do it all. No one does it alone. And in our culture, when I look at what's been going on over the last 3 years, I was reading a study about the effects of the pandemic on all of us. It touched absolutely everyone on the planet. Some of the effects are folks are feeling burnt out, isolated. Their identity shifted. Maybe they left a job or were released from a job. Changing directions, changes in priorities. How many of us retreated and have found it difficult to come back out? Right? We've lost identities in the world that shut down for some time. We changed habits, not necessarily for the better. I have found a whole new world in cake. One of the studies talked about folks not getting out, going to events, meeting people, and so on. And obviously, that's not something we can't logically say that makes absolute sense. We want to be safe. We don't want to get sick. And at the same time, we are such social, connected beings. And what's interesting is that Americans in that retreat, we went back into doing something that is absolutely almost the worst thing we can do. The University of Portland did a study, and they said the most important thing to understand about U.S. Americans, that's folks that have been born in this country and have been engaged in what I can say is the majority culture. That the most important thing to understand about U.S. Americans is probably their devotion to individualism. They have been trained from early in their lives to consider themselves separate individuals who are responsible for their own situations in life and their own destinies. They have not been trained to see themselves as members of a close-knit, tightly interdependent family, religious group, nation, or any group. That's how we've been raised. You've heard the phrase, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Just do it. You can do it. Do it alone. In fact, if you don't do it alone, I failed. People are seen as separate individuals with individual needs. We often need time to be alone and to be by ourselves, to be ourselves. But at the same time, what happens is, most often in our culture, we've become self-centered. And maybe we like to blame the millennials, but we're not a lot different. Sometimes we are so isolated and lonely, and it's because we see ourselves so separate. Americans believe competition brings out the best in people. The result is competition is emphasized over cooperation, even amongst centers, right? I remember going to a minister's convo before the pandemic, and it was just a consistent question was, how many people are in your community? Which really meant was, do you have more than me? Because that's what we're taught, is those numbers have sort of represent the success we may have. Through the pandemic, every Sunday I would get up, whether it was on video, and then eventually when we got back together at Namaste, and I would look out and I'd go, what did I do? It's not that unusual to think that. Because we think that whatever we do is the effect. It's not. Not at all. There are common reasons why people do this, and part of this is, and I know you've heard this, we have a DIY, a do-it-yourself mentality. We must do it ourselves, right? When my wife and I were looking to buy a house again 5 years ago, and we were shopping for homes, one of the interesting things about shopping is we ran into a bunch of homes that were being flipped. Have you ever looked at a home that's been flipped? Sometimes it's great, especially depending on who the contractor is. And sometimes it's an absolute disaster because all it is paint and glue and Band-Aids to make it look great when underneath it there are much bigger problems. And that's representative of the fact, look, I applaud the attempt, but I am getting more and more clear on things that I cannot do on my own. I'm getting more and more clear that when I get in the shower and I shave my legs and I do all those things to prepare, that's not all of my preparation. My preparation is connecting with each person when I walk in that door in some way, shape, or form. And here's the four-letter word of change, I ask for help. It's really hard to ask for help, isn't it? It's the last thing I do. I think it's kind of like if my house was on fire, I'm going to grab a hose before I call 911. Doesn't that seem silly? They would actually do that. I mean, would you ever imagine that you would pull your own tooth and not let a dentist do it? How about perform surgery on yourself? Would you ever consider that? But yet the most important thing in our lives, which is us, we will try to do it absolutely, entirely alone. Because this head knows better. Really. It comes down to, in that hyper-individualistic culture that we're in, that we must do it all alone is the worst thing we could do. When we're going through challenges, we will sit in them and let our head create the most amazing, elaborate stories of how victimized we've been. Some of it might be slightly true, but the only way to move from victim to hero in our own stories is not what that video showed, which is thinking that those that really do it alone. We cannot do it alone. It's absolutely impossible in our makeup. If we've had trauma in our lives, doing it alone is the worst thing. In fact, most have had trauma in their lives. And you know what trauma does? Trauma tells you to do it alone because somehow you're wrong. Whenever I think I need to do something alone, which I never do, most everything I do is not necessarily alone. The only thing that I do alone is often meditate and read and study. But when I'm in a problem, when I am in a situation and I'm sitting here looking at it going, you know, I need to process this. I need to figure this out. I have a dozen resources to which I reach out to. My therapist is on speed dial, as well as my practitioner and another minister and friends that we work together to do the work we do. In fact, I even go as far as, oh my gosh, sign up for a class. Go searching for a book, but not just read the book myself. I will actually take the book and I will talk to others about what I'm finding out, because I don't, rightfully so, trust this head completely. I trust that it'll get there with help, but I do not trust that it will get there alone, because this head doesn't like to connect here, because connecting here opens me up to really what's going on within me. Research suggests that even children as early as the age of 5 do not reach out for help. I was talking to a friend of mine who said that her daughter, on the way home when she picked her up for school, and she's 7, she picked up for school and she hands her water bottle to her mom, my friend, and says, "Mom, could you open this? I couldn't get it open." This was the end of the day. And she asked her daughter, she says, "Why did you ask someone for help?" And she goes, "Because I didn't want folks to know I couldn't do it." That is more common than not just that 7-year-old. How many of you have gone through an entire day not asking for help, and finally, upon asking for help, got what you needed? Yeah, if one hand doesn't go up, I'd be shocked, right? It wasn't a really call for hands, but you get what I mean. I can do it myself has both positive and negative aspects. It does. I can hop on YouTube anytime and watch a video and get some insight into something. I can study, and a lot of times studying by myself is better because I can get through the material without interruptions, right? But when I want to process material, when I want to look at solutions for my own life, That's not where it happens. I have ahas all the time because obviously the role that I have now in the world is that I'm always studying. It's part of the role, because if you don't, it's really difficult to do this because you're teaching often, you're coaching, counseling often. But even in that, if I run into a situation where I'm coaching someone and I go, you know what? I think I need to process this with someone, not just because of me, but because I want to be my best me. And I don't know it all. If we wish to enter into a less limited experience, we must sacrifice our limitations. We must take those limitations, one of them being doing it all on our own. And we must put that on the altar, and we must give that up. In my 20s, I was experiencing probably one of the most difficult times in my life. I was suicidal. I was coming out. I was dealing with family trauma. My life shifted because I asked for help. And it took a few times to get the right help, because sometimes you ask the wrong people for help. And I say wrong as in they're not a good match for the type of help we need. And sometimes we characterize, well, I did ask for help, but look what happened. The question I have for you is, how much do you want your life to change? How much are you willing to invest in your life to change? How much are you willing to let go of doing it alone, doing it by yourself? How much you're willing to let that go? Because that is the difference between the life that we're living now and the life we want to live. In my 20s, when I asked for help, it was completely contrary to what I had been taught, what I had been told was safe, what had been modeled for me. But somehow along the way, the right help showed up, because I had to figure out what the right help was, because I wasn't even used to seeking help. I had to figure out what was the appropriate type of help I needed. And often along the way, I don't know about you, but I go in and this is what I want to deal with, and I end up dealing with something completely different because I think I know what's wrong. But the only way that truly is revealed is that I operate in harmony with my design. And my design was operated to be connected and not to operate separate from everyone else in the world. It's our hyper-individualism that leads to our nature, leads to the belief that we are separate and that we must do it alone. Some of the things that associate with not asking for help, and I just want you to consider these and see if one of these are yours. We have negative associations, help seeking with a negative view of taking handouts, or think that someone is lazy if they can't do it themselves. Anyone feel like that? Self-criticism. We are our own worst critic, guaranteed. And think that asking for help means that you're incapable or weak. I don't know how many times I've heard this, I just don't want to be a burden. Oh, yeah. Number one thing I've heard. Self-sacrificing. Believing that you should put the needs of others before your own. You might worry about, again, burdening someone with your needs. Overestimating the likelihood of rejection. What if I ask for help and someone says no? Will I take that as a sort of universal no, that help is not available? Or maybe it's just that person cannot help me right now. There's a study done on when people ask for help, and sometimes when you ask for help, somebody that says no, more than likely the second time will of course say yes. Guaranteed they're going through the same guilt that you are about having asked for help and having been rejected. Not asking for help leads to an intensity of loneliness. It's the result of an attitude that community is something into which one is received. When we walk into community, such as here, we want to belong. But the only way we can belong is to ask for help, is to ask beyond that which we show up as. I show up absolutely capable. It looks like sometimes I got it all. I know that because people say that to me. That is not true. The only reason my life has moved into a place in which I feel often, I didn't say always, did I, peace, is because I ask. I ask. And what I don't do is I don't show up in community without having done my prep so that I can be open. So that process that I described to you as to what I do on Sunday morning is so that I can be here, open and available, not only for you, but for me. So that I'm present, so that when I need help, I ask for it. So that I can look around and see folks that are here not only to serve, but I can look around and see folks that just might need a little support. Asking for help is key. Practitioners, could I just have the practitioners raise their hands? Thank you. Wait, keep your hands up, and I want everyone to look around the room. Do you see these folks? They were trained into how did life get to be the way it is. They were trained to have an understanding how things happen through the action of the law, releasing bondage to persons and conditions. They were trained to learn how to accept life as it is. They were trained to understand that life evolves through cause and effect. They were trained in how our consciousness is the cause in our lives and others. They were trained to look at when you approach them to be objective, to not blame, to not call things right or wrong. They see each person as a journey, not good or bad, just as people and the condition that is being met with attention at the time. And each person is having a particular perception of their life. They treat consciousness, not you. Why do we go to them? Because they're our first place to ask for help. And if we're not using them, often we don't understand it. Often we don't know what kind of support they can give us. But if you feel you need help before you leave today, raise your hands again, practitioners. You reach out to these folks. There's a class coming, Essential Earnest. It explores these principles and how we can live them from a much simpler way than reading the big Science of Mind textbook. You've got Sylvia and Juanita teaching it. Let them teach you. If you haven't begun a journey more consciously, begin it. If you're on your journey and you'd like more, take it. Working together provides us with an opportunity to be mirrored back. What we need, who we really are, the divine that we are, so that when we do shave our legs, it's not wasted. It's not wasted as just an activity. We show up ready to be helped. We show up ready and open. Let's pray. So I just anchor into that which has already been spoken, this affirmation and recognition that God is all there is, this God which is the action of the universe being love, this desire to create, the universe's constant urge and pull to ever move. It is not static, it is always changing as is everything in it, and yet it is all one. And I know that I am one with it, and every person in this room. So what I hold today in this place and space of, did I shave my legs for this? Yes, I did. And everything else I did to come forward today, to step intentionally into my life, asking for help and releasing shame or guilt or inadequacy or not enough or self-loathing or whatever is in the way. I ask for help. So today that door is open, and I do that, and I speak that word for all in this room. So I just allow these words to be released into that law, because it just says, of course, of course. And I let it go, and I let it be, and so it is.